The media is playing a big role in this controversy, and I think the media is guilty of censorship because a lot of the points that we are making in this battle are being ignored by the mainstream media.
Similar acts are happening in towns and countries, towns and cities across the country where public health officials are not standing up. The executive, the mayors are not standing up and saying this needs to stop because it's imperiling the health of the public. So I have to applaud Mayor Noggle for doing that.
I feel I have the strong support of a majority of the residents here in Fort Lauderdale, and it really doesn't matter, you know, how I'm attacked. Because of my strong beliefs, I feel that I will continue to advocate the position that is right and that is moral and that is in the interest of lawfulness and public safety. So whatever the consequences, so be it.
Many people think that allowing for same-sex marriage doesn't affect you. In fact, that's one of the main arguments. It only is a privilege for that couple. It doesn't affect anyone else. But we've already seen that, in fact, it does affect other people, particularly parents who want to raise their children with moral beliefs and with the understanding that marriage is between one man and one woman.
I'm concerned about same-sex marriage for a host of reasons, but I think the chief one that motivates me is this, that when government prescribes a wholesale redefinition of the family, it knowingly sets a policy that knowingly deprives children of a mom and a dad. Study after study after study, all the ones that are done in a nonpartisan manner, tell us that kids need a mom and a dad to do well in life. Two moms could be two great moms, but they can never be a great father. And that's the point of it all. The genders complement one another. That was inherent at our design. I can do things for my sons that my wife cannot do just because I'm a man. My wife can do things for my sons and understand and give them impressions in life that I cannot have any hope of providing to them because I'm not a woman.
It's profoundly wrong to make children the guinea pigs in a very radical social experiment.
So those who are saying, I want to have the rest of the public recognize my homosexual relationship or my lesbian relationship, are essentially saying, don't just tolerate what I do. Don't just say, I'm going to live and let live. Don't just say what anybody else does is their own business and I'm not going to interfere with it. You have to approve what I'm doing. And you don't just need to approve it. You have to say that it's legitimate religiously. You have to say that what I'm doing is not sinful. You have to say that what I'm doing is just as legitimate, just as valid as a marriage between a man and a woman.
You know, the reason why many of us press so hard for amendments to our state constitutions to define marriage as between one man and one woman really goes back to our United States Constitution. And there's a clause within the Constitution that's called the full faith and credit clause. And effectively it says this: look, if there's a law in Massachusetts, people in West Virginia have to give it the full faith and credit that it's due. Because of the full faith and credit clause of the United States Constitution, if a couple were to go to Massachusetts or to go to Connecticut or even go to California during the time that was legal and get married in those states, because of that clause in our United States Constitution, in technicality, we are supposed to recognize the laws from the other states, unless we have a policy within our own state to not do that, or within our own Constitution not to do that. Well, that's why these Defense of Marriage Acts were introduced in the first place. That's why throughout the country there are some, I think 39 or more states that have put within their statutes laws that will limit what marriages they will and will not recognize.
It's really interesting when you look at the outcomes of elections. In every instance where the definition of the family has been put for a vote, the American public says, I want to keep marriage a sacred title so that it exclusively refers to a relationship between a man and a woman. And that's universal. Every time it's come up for a vote, it has passed. And the public has said very, very clearly that marriage should be between a man and a woman.
I had always been of the notion that all violent crimes are hate crimes. I've never known a crime to be committed violently that was done out of pleasure.
people need to understand, first of all, that nobody advocates violence against anyone for any reason, and that is criminal, and it's already a crime to assault somebody, and it should remain a crime, and nobody advocates that. But what we have with hate crimes legislation, unfortunately, is it creates a two-tier justice system where we have a special class of victim that is elevated to a higher level of importance over just the common individual. And that, on its face, is a violation of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which guarantees equal protection under the laws. Well, if it is a more serious crime to assault somebody because they self-identify as a homosexual than it is to assault a pregnant woman or a little old lady, well, then that discriminates against the pregnant woman or the little old lady. That lifts up the homosexual individual as a more relevant and more important victim and makes that crime a more serious crime. Well, that's constitutionally dubious, to say the least.
So when we pass these hate crimes legislations or non-discrimination ordinances that are out there, we then are creating effectively a brigade of thought police. Almost this Orwellian notion that we have the government body that is overlooking all of our thoughts and determining whether or not this is a racially motivated or a sexually orientated motivated crime. That's something that we shouldn't be doing. Our justice system is set up to judge action. And when we allow this thought police to enter the occasion, we create up a whole new class of victims, and ones that we shouldn't be doing. All victims deserve equal justice, regardless of the motivation of the crime.
Canadian youth pastor Stephen Busan worked with kids from all walks of life. He was a father figure to them. The cool kids, the loners, the straight kids, and those struggling with sexual identity. He ministered to them all. But when he felt the homosexual machine was pushing its agenda to the detriment of those kids, he put his feelings into words and sent a letter to the editor of his local paper, the Red Deer Advocate. The fallout from that simple act gives us a disturbing look into the chilling effect of hate crimes legislation.
I already was writing letters to the editor occasionally, just like anybody else can in the community. But through this youth program, I started to become more aware of how the teens were being, intentionally or unintentionally, my belief, brainwashed or lured into, manipulated into believing that homosexuality was normal, necessary, acceptable, and productive. And that was actually, word for word, the initiative of a government-funded agenda program that was being introduced into public schools. On top of that, I found out that a teacher, public school teacher, who started a pro-gay tolerant group within a Red Deer High School, was inviting a gay minister to teach youth the pro-gay version of the Bible. So enough was enough for me. It was one thing, you know, I absolutely believe in tolerance. I believe that someone has a right to claim that they're homosexual in a democratic society, and I believe that if that's what they want, you know, though I disagree with that lifestyle, I believe that it's detrimental to, holistically, to a person's well-being. I believe that if that's the way they want to live their lives, you know, they should have that right to do so. God gives them that right to do so. Where the boundaries were overstepped was when my tax dollars, and it's not about money, was when my tax dollars were being used to fund an initiative that was absolutely against my values as a human being, my values as a Christian. And so I wrote a letter to the editor that was written to be hard-hitting. It was written strong. It wasn't designed to be a fluffy, you know, we're going to meet you halfway. It was designed to say to heterosexuals, to mainly Christian heterosexuals, wake up. Look what's coming in the back door in our country.
The letter was printed in the paper on June 17, 2002. It began with this paragraph. The following is not intended for those who are suffering from an unwanted sexual identity crisis. For you, I have understanding, care, compassion, and tolerance. I sympathize with you and offer you my love and my fellowship. The letter goes on to say, your children are being warped into believing that same-sex families are acceptable, that men kissing men is appropriate, and the homosexual agenda is not gaining ground because it is morally backed. It is gaining ground because you, Mr. and Mrs. Heterosexual do nothing to stop it. The fallout from the publication of the letter was swift and severe.
Our Supreme Court upheld the Canadian Criminal Code prohibitions on hate speech. What that means is that there is not the same level of protection for freedom of speech in Canada as there is in the United States. And because of that, the Canadian Parliament recently amended the Criminal Code to add sexual orientation to the list of grounds upon which one cannot speak in what is termed a hateful way. If you do, you are subject to prosecution by the Attorney General.